Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Grand Lodge webinar series. This evening, we will be having a Q&A with the newly installed Grand Master. As we've talked before, these aren't tiled, so let's keep our questions, well governed, if you could, please. The recording is running. Please keep yourself on mute. Mostly, you can ask questions, unmute yourself, but we'll just try to be cautious about that. Use the chat feature if you choose to send a question. I may just call on you directly, and there will be a poll at the end. So coming up after that, we have 5 lessons I learned with my kids from Worship Brother Brad. Worship Brother Sean's doing a thing about truth and fact. And then we have some other interesting sessions coming up here. The one I want to point out, we do have this one coming up, a light in the darkness. That session, due to some content copyright stuff, can't be recorded. So we want to make sure you sign up for that one. It's really good. It's about Masonry in the German concentration camps. So, too far, too fast. The show and tell challenge is still running, as we've talked about before. And please, if you want to submit your get information, submit it on the website here. We are still looking for presentations. If you have an interesting presentation that you'd like to put up, please do so. Send an email to the mentoring committee or drop us a call. We'll respond back. And no further ado, we have the Grand Master. Most worshipful, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to have some question and answer with us.
It's a pleasure to be here and to answer whatever questions I can to serve the craft.
I will give you the opportunity to have any kind of introductory statement that you may want to make. If not, we can jump to questions.
Go ahead and jump.
Oh, okay. Well, I know Worship Brother Mike has a question, so why don't you go ahead and get started there, Worship Brother Mike.
All right, well, the question I have is, where are we at as far as, the COVID rules and stuff? Has there been any changes, mostly pertaining to the food and lodge situations and stuff?
Okay, I'm going to be sufficiently evasive. So what it amounts to is this. The COVID committee met tonight, and their recommendation at this point is said, see what the governor says tomorrow, and then we are going to discuss with both the corporate board and the board of custodians on Saturday, and then they will meet informally or formally on Monday and make a new recommendation if it seems like it should happen. Which says, no, there's no change.
Not yet.
Well, so most worshipful, here's a question for you.
Sure.
Tell how did you first decide to become a Mason, and can you give us an idea of what your experience was when you were first coming in? Because I'm assuming it has been a while, but I just want to give the opportunity to kind of talk about the history part.
Are you saying it's a while because I have my 50-year pin?
No, yes, that's exactly why. That is exactly why, because I knew you had your 50-year pin. So
yeah, become a Mason. If you go back 50 years, you could not be asked to become a Mason, for those that remember that period of time. So how it worked in my family is my father gave me a check and said, this will cover your dues, your initiation fees, and everything you need to get through the 3rd degree. If you are interested, take the check and spend it. Otherwise, fine, you get nothing. So I actually did. But my father at that time, of course, had a, how should I say, a vested interest, because at the time he was the deputy Grand Master.
Oh, that is awesome. So what was the experience? How is it different than it is today? Is there any difference that from the experience in joining than you would see in a lodge at this time?
I think it varied depending on the lodges you were in.
Mhm.
Back when I went in through Hibbing, you took your first degree, and they said you have 2 weeks to get the first section of the lecture learned, and then you will take your proficiency, and we will have the second degree scheduled. And then you will have 2 weeks to get your third degree done, and we will schedule that. And then you have 2 weeks to have the third degree proficiency, which essentially was the first section of the lecture at the time. So there was no waiting around, and you were assigned a coach, if you will. And that coach met with you virtually every day or every other day for that 2 weeks to make sure you had it learned.
Huh?
I was very, very fortunate. My father was my coach, and he was a custodian.
So you know, got to know the work well then. So.
Yeah. He would say that is not what it means, or how it should be said, or that this is the way you do it. So yes, there was pretty strict.
So it's pretty clear the apple didn't fall far from the tree, right?
That's for others to decide. My father and I are a little bit different because I still like to enjoy a lot of things. If you went to a school of instruction back then, it was awfully serious, and you got stopped for just about every word. We don't quite act that way anymore, and we enjoy doing the work and saying, this is what you should be working on to get done, but we're not there to, how should I say, chastise. We're there to teach more than we are to chastise. So we have a different philosophy and outlook on how we interact with our brethren.
As I like to call it, the Foster way.
Oh, Foster who can't stand still?
You're right, exactly. That's true, but that's okay.
As someone who's been corrected many times by you, I can confirm that, yes.
Well,
Brother,
the objective is to make everybody better, not to criticize what they have done.
Absolutely, I would agree. Brethren, questions, please. Frank, go ahead.
Is there going to be a one-day masonry class during your term?
Provided that it's allowed and the number of people we can fit in the auditorium, changes, which I suspect it will by the time we get to January, then yes, there is a one-day to masonry scheduled for January.
Good. I might have a candidate for it.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
Well, I mean, right now we're under very strict limits on how many people we can fit in the auditorium. And the same thing is true for most of the lodges, and none of them are big enough to hold a complete one-day class if you're having 40, 50 candidates.
Yeah, very true. So do we have any idea when we think we're going to be getting to the Master Mason degree again?
I can be just as evasive on that again by saying,
please be evasive. That's fine. We understand.
The Board of Custodians is meeting on Saturday to block it out and to determine what we would have to do to be able to do a third degree and still follow the requirements that are in our obligation.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get to do that again soon. That would be great.
Agreed.
Yeah, I know the lodges are getting, as you well, I'm sure know, the lodges are getting anxious for news, and obviously, you can't do anything until things start to open up. So
no,
that's good to know that hopefully we'll have some news next week. So,
but I'll also add this, Don, that we already, by testing Brainerd, a couple of weeks ago for their first degree, that we see a path where at least most lodges that have the skill level can do a first and second degree themselves, not requiring us to do it as a group, but we may limit the number of candidates you can put through.
Yeah,
sure.
That does make sense.
Yeah, as I've got lodges that are chomping at the bit they've got new, since we started the cycle a while back, they've got new petitioners that want EA degrees now. So
yeah, it looks like that might be possible going forward. Can't say yes or no until the Board of Custodians meet and take their advice, but it looks like it, because we did one in Brainerd and made the Brainerd officers do all the work. So that was our test case to find out if the procedures that we were using would be doable by a local lodge. And now we just need to check and find out what the new contact and distancing rules are going to be. And we're hoping to get some clarification on that tomorrow.
yeah,
And
I
then
did see a note I did see a note today, I don't know if you saw it, that the governor hopes to be back to normal sometime this summer. I mean, back to basically all those restrictions limited sometime this summer, which would be great.
Yes, and we will try as best possible to follow those guidelines as good as good citizens of the state of Minnesota.
Frank, go ahead.
You're muted.
You're on mute, Frank.
You're muted.
Frank, you're muted.
That's different for me.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of quiet.
I was just going through a list of mailings for our Daylight Lodge, and I came across the question as to who our DR is right now. And I started looking on the web. I can't find where the Lodge DR is listed. Now, is that my issue?
It should be listed in the Lodge information section in Grandview.
Well, I'll have to look again. I couldn't find it. And then
Daylight Lodge, which lodge number you would talk
348.
348. I will take a quick look and see if I can find it, but you can keep asking questions.
Yeah, I'll have to think of some more questions.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Ran out of questions.
Is that good or bad?
No,
well, then I noticed on the e-Mason, the one that I received had the area DR or area deputy, and it was southeast. I thought we in the Twin Cities were South Metro, East Metro, I should say.
You thought you were Metro East?
Yeah, and the e-Mason I received had was it the southeast DR or area deputy, not DR.
Frank, there is only one e-Mason now. There's not a area wide, individually areaed.
Oh,
everyone gets the same one.
Back starting in January, they went from the 6 separate e-Masons being sent out to one e-Mason being sent out, and each month a different AD will write in there. So you're going to see an AD or a message from an AD from another area next month. I did post a link as far as the Grand Lodge website goes, where it will show the district reps in the chat.
I take it the old Grand Lodge website doesn't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Because I tried to get into that and it went to Grandview right away. Well, we have these sessions so I can catch up.
Well, the Minnesota Grand Lodge website still exists.
Oh, it does. Yeah, the Grand Lodge site still exists.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
the Grand, it's still there.
I thought when I went into it, things I was looking for went right to Grandview.
Some of the stuff has been moved to Grandview. But to answer your question, so I guess, Keith Donaldson is your district representative for Daylight.
Well, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But it's
and you are Metro East.
Yeah, you are Metro East. So that is findable on Grandview.
So I don't think it is available to the member side of Grandview.
The biggest problem that we have with that and looking up something for some other people, depending on what your access level is each of us by the station that we hold as far as our offices have a different way of looking at Grandview.
Yep.
So I can see something totally different than you may see.
Yeah.
And the Grand Secretary can see. So it depends on which access you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the secretary access.
Then you should be able to see everything about your lodge.
And who the DR is and such. Well.
Yes, you can.
That'll be my assignment.
Right.
If you just go to the Grand Lodge website, click find a lodge and scroll down to your lodge. It'll tell you, when you click on your lodge, it'll tell you, it says the address, it says the description, meetings, master, and right below the secretary, it says,
Oh.
it says master,
Yep.
then secretary, then it says district rep, and then it says area deputy.
No, does it? Okay, good.
Yep.
Well, that's what I thought, but for some reason, the regular Grand Lodge site was kicking me over to Grandview. But I'll have to check into that.
Okay. Well, since we've had a tour of Grandview, anybody got another question for the Grandmaster?
Well, I'll ask one. I guess
Please.
one of the questions I had is any specific new things you see coming in the coming months, most worshipful, that we should be aware of? Or I know right now everybody's talking about getting out from under COVID, but assuming that we're going to do that, any other themes or areas of emphasis you're looking at focusing on this year?
I'm trying to at least follow getting off of COVID in orderly fashion and do what's best for the brethren that way. We will have a number of events during the year, including the dedication of a lodge building and dedication of the Eastern Star Chapel, and a number of those activities where we are going to try to get a number of people out and visiting with each other again. So it'll be those types of things. We're going to have a couple of banquets too. So is there going to be anything? The only thing I have encouraged among the ADs and DRs to a certain extent through Scott is to say, if there are any things that you can do together as groups and do them outside, especially during the summer, do. You'd have my blessing and encouragement. Because there are still going to be those that won't, those that can't, and those that will. And sometimes you don't have enough people for those that will to get the large enough group. So I'm saying, then do it together. And I think that would be a good direction to go, for the time being.
That's one of the things I'm hearing a lot of talk about, is finding ways to get people to come back. Get people back that have been away. And what I'm hearing is if they can have some like outdoor events that people can feel comfortable at, that get a lot of people out to, that'd be a good way to get people back being comfortable with one another.
Yeah. And even if it's a group event of several lodges, so that you have
Sure.
a large enough mass of people.
I know
And
one
that's-
lodge is planning a big hog roast, inviting the lodge, the Star, the Jobies, the DMLA, basically the whole Masonic family,
Excellent.
to have for a big hog roast out in the parking lot.
Gee, that isn't Anoka, is it?
No, it can't be. Mm-mm.
Well, I'll let you figure it out.
I'm shocked.
But if they get excited about doing some of those things together and getting together with each other under those types of circumstances, I'm hoping that will generate interest in both their individual lodges and in our areas.
Worship Brother Andrew, you had a question?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, or
No,
you're
I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Because you poke something doesn't mean it works.
right. Yeah.
Every grandmaster comes in with certain goals, individual specific goals in mind. And of course, due to the nature of this year's Grand Lodge, maybe you'd like to share kind of what 3 things are most in your mind right now for this coming year.
One of the things that I think our craft needs to do, at least from my perspective, is to go beyond being civil to going back to being a brotherhood. And I don't know how we are going to be able to inculcate that across the craft, but I think that's absolutely necessary. And I kind of couch that with the idea that realize that in our work, we say we take people of all different backgrounds and opinions. And so that should be a norm, not something that says we all do and believe the same thing, but still do it in a formal manner of brotherhood. So if you're going to have a goal, it's more of a philosophy than a goal. But I would like to to try to incorporate that into the way that we work. And the second side of that says that we are a Masonic family if everybody is related to Masonry. So therefore, should we include, the Shrine and the Rites and Eastern Star and all of the organizations, Job's Daughters, DMLA, as part of that family and incorporate that same type of philosophy so that we share the burden together and become essentially family, like it says we are. So I only gave you 2. I figure that's broad enough that's probably even more than we can do.
Well, I think that's plenty enough challenge for all of us.
I hope it's a goal that everybody can get behind and work on.
Certainly.
Well, thank you, Most Worshipful. More questions? Anybody got another question for the Grand Master? Don, please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I run into a lot, and I know that I'm not unique in this regard, but in my position as area deputy, I get a lot of feedback on this from a lot of people. But the whole ongoing, divide that we see in our society that starts to manifest itself even in the brotherhood and on things like social media, where brothers start tearing each other apart over any number of issues. And I've tried to take the position when I see that happening, I try to, quietly behind the scenes, quietly, privately whisper good counsel in his brothers to say, take a position of saying, I'm not here to say what you can and cannot say, but is this really how you want to be seen as a Mason? And do you really think this is doing anything to contribute constructively to who we are as Masons when you're out there creating, throwing out incendiary comments that are going to divide people and push people away? And I'm looking for, and that's kind of how I've done it now. I've encouraged my DRs to do it, is to do it privately, one-on-one, not get involved in any public fights, and we're not trying to create arguments either. It's trying to follow our obligations as in the most tender manner, whisper in a brother's ear. And I guess if there are any other insights or suggestions you might have in dealing with some of these kinds of things, because I'm seeing it a lot. And a lot of see guys they're talking about leaving Masonry because it's not what they signed up for when they see that happening.
And you want an answer to that, right?
Well, any additional thoughts you may have, on what we, any other suggestions, anything you've seen that works?
I don't know that I've seen anything that works, because somebody who has their mind set and their defense ends up being, well, I believe, or I heard, doesn't give us the foundation that we have in Masonry that says we go by, facts as best we can find them, and we will change. The one story that I have used in one of the education pieces that I did is going back to the founding fathers, where we had essentially in the East Coast F and AM lodges and AF and AM lodges, and back then the F and AM were coming from England's side, if I'm not mistaken, and they were essentially saying we should stay with the king. And the AF and AM were actually coming from the Scottish side to a great extent, and we're saying, oh no, we shouldn't stay with the king. And what happened was many of our founding fathers joined both lodges and discussed with people they trusted individually what was the best answer, until after several years, they came to a conclusion that this is the best reasoned answer. And so what I try to inform brothers throughout all of this is that I want people I can talk to that I trust, that will disagree with me. And we can have, and this goes back to a Bierman thing, a belly-to-belly discussion. It's not a public discussion, because every time that we put something out on the internet, even as an individual, if we are recognized as a Mason, we are representing Masonry. And nobody can speak for Masonry, even though everybody is trying to do it. And that's, to me, the problem. Remember that they can speak to anything they want, but for Masons, It should be between one brother and another brother, not between me and the rest of the world. So I use that type of structure to say, are you actually acting in behalf of Masonry? Or are you just taking your own philosophy and saying everybody should believe what you believe? And that's not what Masonry is. I don't know if that helps you at all, Don, but
Yeah,
that's
it
my
does.
philosophical background.
Yeah. And one of the challenge I hear a lot of people pushing back on as well. They have their, they always claim their free speech rights and that, and I tell them that you certainly do, but words also have consequences.
Yeah, but if you're
And-
putting up your Masonic emblem next to that and then putting free speech, you are now representing Masonry, not your
Exactly.
free speech.
Exactly.
That's where I
And
have a problem.
And that's where I do too. But I always try to tell them is I always try to approach it from the standpoint of do you really think you're representing yourself as a Mason? And one, you're not accomplishing anything constructive, because the people that agree with you are going to still agree with you, but the people that maybe liked you before and find out that you have a opposing position, you're going to drive them away. You're not accomplishing anything either.
Well, you're also breaking one of the tenets that say our first object is to learn. And you can't learn by stating a fact or a supposed fact and then going back and never talking to anybody else on why they don't agree with you.
Right.
That discussion is critical to being able to come to a reasoned decision. So that's where I have the problem. Is it reasoned? No.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Too
where
much of it just comes from raw emotion and not from constructive thought.
Correct. And why, I mean, no offense, Dayton, I know you're around here someplace. Dayton and I every once in a while agree, and by the time we get done with the discussion, we say, I guess it's just vocabulary, because in many ways we do agree, even though our philosophy on how to get there is not at all aligned. Would that be accurate, Dayton? Now you're
You just hit
muted.
the mute button.
Okay, now try, Dayton.
I hate to disagree with you. No, that's true. We've had many discussions along them lines.
Mm-hmm.
My background and most worshipful backgrounds totally different. And how we get to the end result may be different, but I do believe we work towards the same goal.
Right. The philosophy still works for both of us, even though our methods of getting there may be different.
Exactly. No.
I was going to say way different, but I didn't.
Why not? You did Saturday.
And I will again, too.
Oh, I have no doubt.
But we can still be brothers. We can still disagree. And, we agree that the philosophy is sound. And how we get everybody to agree on philosophy is going back to the first degree: brotherly love, relief, and truth, prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Well, if you do all of that, we got a pretty good, strong foundation.
Sounds like every year we get a different mental challenge.
But shouldn't we?
How to get there? Yeah, it's things can become stagnant after a while. It's good to have some change.
We need the concept of perspective, and where you stand and look at things will change how you understand things. And we all need to look at somebody else's perspective as well as our own.
One of the things that I've picked up from Dayton and many of our conversations over several years is, Dayton's reminded me on a number of occasions that when you see some people behaving in certain ways, either they just don't get what it means to be a Mason, or they've temporarily forgotten what it really means to be and behave like a Mason. And I think sometimes we have to gently remind them that, is this really how a Mason should be acting?
And this is where Dayton and I sometimes disagree. I would say you gently remind him. Dayton says you tell him right out and don't give him any wiggle room.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. I'm just saying it's a different method. It's one that
I
I don't
haven't-
use.
Get into it here, huh?
As someone who has been hit upside the head metaphorically, at least by Dayton a few times over the years, his
I don't
method
know
is
what you're talking
effective.
about.
Oh, it is. Yeah, you know exactly where he stands, and that's fine.
Yep.
You know, and
Yep.
other times you have to make sure that you coax them along so that they come to an understanding.
Yep.
So yes.
Peyton, you
Because-
don't unsheath the knife hand, do you?
He pulls his coat aside and shows his Uzi.
Mhm. Well, we all know me fairly well, and if you don't, you might. I am a very direct person. I won't sit there and blow smoke.
No,
And,
and he's well respected too, and I respect him very much.
it just works for me. You know, everybody has a different style, and I think Ralph hit it on the head. No matter how you approach it, if you're respected by the brother, you know, you can do a lot more with a lot less leverage. You know what I mean? But they have to know you're willing to reach that point if need be.
Mhm.
Yep. Very true. Well, thank you.
Question in the chat.
We do. All right. What is your all-time most favorite Masonic book? Most worshipful.
My all-time most famous Masonic book.
Favorite, not famous. Favorite.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking.
Mhm.
You know, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, my most favorite book still has to be The Ritual.
Hmm.
Because I think the ritual gives us the foundation of Masonry, and everything else gives people's opinion on what it means to their living.
Yeah.
So I always go back to the ritual and say, the ritual says this. Because one of the questions I asked is, what is Masonry? And that's, you know, asked all the time, correct?
Mhm.
And I come back to one statement that's in the second degree. Masonry is a progressive science. Done. Now, go ahead and define all of that.
Well, thank you. Brothers, any other questions? Any questions? More questions for Grandmaster? Bill, please.
Good evening, excuse me, most worshipful. In the last year with the restrictions that we've had in place, have we seen a decline in petitions than we would have had in other years?
I would say probably yes, only, and this is my opinion, of course. So can I substantiate it? No. Only because we don't go out or haven't been going out and meeting with our public, you know, that might be interested. We have gotten a number of inquiries through the internet, and the number of petitions coming through have been pretty good. However, we aren't getting them through the degrees, you know, because we essentially can't as easily in our current circumstances. So the number of Masons we've been making is significantly less. But I'm one of those that say, if you take the time to make sure they understand Masonry, we end up keeping more. But that's my position.
I would
So
say we've seen a nice uptick in the last since the beginning of the year. I know in Metro West, we've had a big jump in the number of candidates in the pipeline. So we've had over 30% increase in our pipeline and just since January. Since January.
I don't know if that answers your question, Bill, but that's
it does.
where we
Thank you.
both are. I think it's going to take some time before we can look at the numbers.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I was sidetracked. Any other questions for most worshipful?
We'll have a
Well,
lot more
great.
next week, probably.
Oh, I'm sure. There'll be
But
more
you-
as soon as we hang up the call here.
And
But,
you know, you can always send me an email and ask a
Absolutely.
question, and I can be just as evasive in an email as I can in person.
I'm going to launch the poll here real quick too, so we can get that out of the way.
I have a question. Everyone has their own way of answering things. How would you answer the question if a random person would come up to you, not knowing a lot about masonry, and they ask you, okay, what do you do?
And I would say that we are a cross section of the people in the United States. However, we try to teach a moral philosophy that gives us a unified foundation. And having that philosophy allows us and makes us do what we do, which can be, working on things, philanthropy, being brothers to other people, serving other people. It's because we come from a philosophy that says this is who we are that makes us do what we do, rather than we do philanthropy or we do service or it's the other way around. It's the foundation that says we are brothers, therefore we have an obligation to the world. We look for truth. We look for, judgment. We don't work for judgment. We look for what's the word?
Have a,
I'm not sure.
Justice. There's a
Justice.
difference between
Right.
judgment and justice. And
Thank
we
you.
look for justice, not judgment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a different, perspective.
Yep.
I wonder if you'd have any comments on when people ask me that. I say we're a fraternity, not a civic organization.
Yeah, fraternity amounts to what I say is brotherhood. But a lot of times fraternity, especially if you've been to college, means that you are a bunch of party people. And so therefore, I don't usually use the fraternity other than I'm saying we're a brotherhood, that's essentially called a fraternity. And
That's
so
just
I
when you're,
start with
only when you're
brotherhood.
talking about, only when you're talking about the Shriners.
Oh yeah, then it's a party people.
Yeah.
So I'm careful on the language there so that we have a common foundational language that allows us to make the difference between a college fraternity or a fraternity in its vernacular and the brotherhood that our society makes of men who join our organization.
I've always wondered when people say, well, we're a brotherhood of people under God or something like that. I don't think people really grasp what that's all about.
No, they don't. No, but
I
if you take brotherhood and what obligation that does, and I will even quote part of that, by brotherly love we are taught to.
Mhm.
And people say, well, you aren't supposed to give the ritual. I'm going, it's in the manual. Read it. So I give them that, saying this is the obligation we say that we are going to make for ourselves by joining this group.
Well, I
and that
suppose
gives them enough.
Suppose I should use, we are a fraternal organization, not a fraternity.
Correct. And
I did.
people don't know what the difference is.
Yeah.
Same thing when I'm talking about justice and judgment. They're the same. Well, no, they aren't.
No.
So we get very particular with our words and verbiage, vocabulary.
Well, after being in the organization for over 50 years, the older I get, the harder it is to really explain what's going on because it's intangible.
Well, yeah, it goes back to, the beauty of masonry that we have, it says in the degree, and you don't get that picture until you have enough experience to see nuance.
And then how do you explain it?
You can't.
You can't. That's correct. It's an old Joseph Campbell issue that there's 3 levels of conversation, the daily chit chat, and then kind of serious stuff. And then there's the real thing about the soul and feelings. You can't explain.
Yeah, the esoteric side. Yes.
So
And not only that, each one of us have gotten a different path to get there. And we'll still see it slightly different. As we use the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar, well, one perfect ashlar will fit a place in the building, but not another. So therefore, that perfect ashlar is only perfect for a specific position. And I think people are like that in masonry. They are
Right.
perfect differently.
It's a good analogy. I like it. Any more questions there for Most Worshipful Brethren? Well, thank you, Most Worshipful, for your time and patience with the questions from the group. Just as a reminder, upcoming, we have some more sessions coming up each Wednesday at 7 p.m. Check out the Grand Lodge site for the webinar stuff. And the poll has been completed. So thank you, Most Worshipful, again, and everyone for attending.
Well, thanks to all the members who attended.